The Council's miscalculation. The Galactic Council chamber was vast, its towering pillars adorned with the banners of over 100 interstellar civilizations. The air hummed with the low murmur of debate, a steady rhythm of voices from species spread across the stars. At the center of the vast chamber stood High Chancellor Varzek, his long, skeletal fingers drumming against the transparent podium. His dark eyes flicked across the gathered representatives, exuding an air of absolute certainty. Humans are weak. His voice echoed throughout the chamber, amplified by the hovering drums that recorded the proceedings. For over a millennium, they have avoided war. Their peace is not a sign of wisdom. It is cowardice. They refuse to fight. And now, when the galaxy stands on the precipice of annihilation, they hide behind their treaties and diplomacy, believing it will shield them forever. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. The Terran Empire had long been an anomaly, an advanced civilization with vast resources, yet curiously absent from galactic conflicts. While other species built mighty fleets, waged endless wars, and expanded through conquest, humanity had remained isolated, fortifying their core systems and keeping their military might shrouded in secrecy. To the Council, their lack of participation was nothing more than a sign of cowardice. "We cannot afford to let them sit idle any longer," interjected Grand Marshal Felvrak, a reptilian warlord from the Drakkar Dominion. His scaled fists clenched as his forked tongue flickered out in irritation. "We are bleeding resources fighting the Krogan war machine. We must force the Terrans to choose, fight alongside us, or be dismantled piece by piece." Several council members nodded in agreement. The Krogan horde, a brutal warrior race, had been waging war across the galaxy, consuming entire systems in their wake. Despite combined efforts, the Council's fleet was struggling to hold them back. And yet, the Terrans, who possessed vast fleets, advanced technology, and logistical capabilities unmatched by any other, had refused to take part in the war. "We should issue an ultimatum," suggested Ambassador Sale from the amphibious Nalathi Republic, her voice smooth yet cold. "Either they stand with us, or we strip their empire of its riches." A collective murmur of approval rose from the chamber. The decision was all but made. A message would be sent to the Terran High Command, demanding their immediate allegiance in the war effort. If they refused, the Council would blockade their trade routes, cripple their economy, and, if necessary, invade. After all, the Council reasoned, how much resistance could a pacifist species truly offer? But what the Council failed to understand, what they had never truly grasped, was that humanity's peace was not born from fear. It was a choice, a carefully calculated decision, one that ensured the galaxy had forgotten what they were truly capable of. 2 days later, the response. When the response from Terra Prime arrived, it was not the desperate plea for negotiations that the Council had expected. The message was brief, almost disappointingly so. 3 words. "We accept. Prepare." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Commander Kralak-Var, a veteran of countless wars, stared at the holographic display with narrowed eyes. His large, bat-like ears twitched in confusion. "That's it," he growled, his voice a low rumble. "No conditions. No negotiations." "This is not the response of a species reluctant to fight," whispered Admiral Orvox of the Zilari, a species known for their military prowess. "This is something else." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. The Terrans had responded far too calmly. This was not the reaction of a species begrudgingly dragged into war. This was the response of a species that had been waiting for an excuse. Kralak-Var turned toward the intelligence officers stationed near the chamber's war console. "What do we know about the Terran military? What are we up against?" A nervous shuffle passed through the officers before one. A squat insectoid named Vilshen stepped forward. His mandibles clicked anxiously. "The Terran Empire has been notoriously secretive about its military capabilities," he admitted. They do not allow foreign warships near their borders, and their military forces are not publicly displayed. Kralakvar's eyes narrowed. Then give me estimates. Fleet size. Weapons technology. Anything. Vilshin hesitated before bringing up a fragmented data report. We know that their fleet is large, but we have no precise numbers. Their technology is advanced, but we have never seen it used in battle. As for their soldiers, there are rumors, stories, but no solid evidence of their combat capabilities. Kralakvar clenched his jaw. So you're telling me we just pressured an unknown military force into joining this war, and we have no idea what they're capable of? Silence. It was the first time in years that uncertainty crept into the Council's war discussions. Then, an alert blared through the chamber. The intelligence officers scrambled to their stations, their screens lighting up with incoming transmissions. High Chancellor, one of them called out, we are receiving reports from our outer surveillance stations near the Terran border. Put it on screen, Varzak ordered. The massive central holographic display flickered, revealing real-time footage from a deep space monitoring outpost near the Terran Empire's borders. What they saw sent a chill through the chamber. The arrival of the Terran war machine. Emerging from the void of space, ships began to appear, but not in the small numbers the Council had expected. First, a few massive dreadnoughts, their dark, angular hulls, unlike anything in the Council's database. Then came waves of cruisers, destroyers, and carriers, appearing in impeccable formation. And then, the capital ships arrived. Colossal behemoths of war, each dwarfing even the largest Council battleships. Their hulls were covered in layered armor plating, their weapon systems glowing with a cold, mechanical efficiency. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. The numbers kept growing. The Galactic Council had expected reinforcements. Instead, they had called forth an unstoppable war machine. A silent message echoed in every mind watching the display. We were never afraid of war. We were merely waiting for the right moment. The moment had come, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The unveiling of the Terran war doctrine. The Galactic Council's war chamber had fallen into a stunned silence, the echoes of the holographic transmission still lingering in the vast hall. The display before them showed the impossible, the Terran war fleet materializing out of the darkness like a force of nature, silent and overwhelming. No one had predicted this. No one had prepared for this. Humanity had not just accepted the Council's ultimatum. They had embraced it. High Chancellor Varzak, who had once stood with unwavering confidence before his peers, now felt a creeping dread settling in his bones. He had mocked the humans, dismissed them as weak, as cowards who feared war. But what he was witnessing now was not the mobilization of an inexperienced empire joining its first conflict. This was the systematic deployment of a species that had long perfected the art of war, one that had simply chosen to hide its true strength. Admiral Orvox of the Zilari, a species renowned for their tactical prowess, finally found his voice. This is impossible. His elongated fingers trembled as he tapped at the console, magnifying the incoming data streams. No known civilization has ever produced this many warships. Even the Krogan Horde does not have these numbers. Our intelligence indicated their military was small. These readings suggest. He trailed off, his voice failing him. Marshal Thelvrak, the hardened warlord of the Drakkar Dominion, had spent centuries on battlefields across the stars. He had seen fleets fall, empires collapse, and worlds reduced to ashes. And yet, as his piercing reptilian eyes analyzed the dark, ominous Terran ships, an unfamiliar emotion clenched his gut. Fear. How? He muttered under his breath. How did they build this without us knowing? The transmission cut out as the last of the Terran fleet entered formation. The stars around them were now blotted out by the sheer number of warships. The Council had never seen this before. And then the final message came through. A single priority communication request from the flagship of the Terran fleet. The name of the vessel alone sent a wave of unease through the council's ranks. TSS Ragnarok. The name carried weight. Myth. Legend. The end of an age. It was a statement. And the council knew it. With a sharp nod, High Chancellor Varzek gestured toward the holographic console. Put it through. The chamber's massive display screen flickered to life, and suddenly he was there. Admiral Marcus Reeve. His uniform was pristine, not a single fold out of place. A deep midnight black, adorned with insignias that meant nothing to the council but somehow felt heavy. His dark, piercing eyes surveyed the council chamber, as if calculating their worth before even speaking. Behind him, the bridge of the TSS Ragnarok was unlike anything the council had ever seen. Sleek, efficient, and filled with personnel who did not rush, did not falter. They moved like clockwork, as if they had fought wars far beyond anything the council could comprehend. Reeve's expression remained neutral, his voice calm, methodical, and unsettlingly controlled. This is Admiral Marcus Reeve of the Turan Imperial Armada. His words carried no arrogance, no emotion, just undeniable certainty. The Terran Empire acknowledges the Galactic Council's request for military assistance. The chamber remained silent, the weight of the moment suffocating. Then Varzek cleared his throat, forcing himself to regain his composure. Admiral Reeve, your presence here is unexpected. Reeve did not blink. We were summoned. We have arrived. The simplicity of the statement sent a chill through the chamber. Varzek struggled to maintain authority. The Council appreciates the willingness of the Terran Empire to assist in this war. Your forces appear substantial. If you could provide us with a breakdown of your fleet's capabilities, we can begin strategic planning. A pause. Then Reeve smiled. It was a slight curve of the lips, cold, precise, but it sent a ripple of discomfort through the chamber. No. The word hung in the air, unnatural in its finality. Varzek's expression hardened. Excuse me. Reeve leaned forward slightly, just enough to remind them that he was speaking from a position of power, not negotiation. The Terran Empire does not operate under the command of the Galactic Council. His voice remained devoid of arrogance. It was simply a statement of fact. We do not seek approval, nor do we require authorization. We are here because we have chosen to be, not because we were forced. Murmurs spread across the chamber. The Council had assumed humanity would fall in line, desperate to prove their worth among the greater galactic powers. Instead, they had arrived as conquerors. Varzek's fingers curled into a fist. Admiral Reeve, I must remind you that the Galactic Council. I am well aware of what the Council represents. Reeve interrupted, his voice unwavering. But let me remind you of something, Chancellor. Reeve gestured to the display behind him. In an instant, the screen changed, showing a tactical analysis of the upcoming battle. A detailed, perfectly calculated breakdown of enemy fleet formations, supply lines, weaknesses, every strategic detail about the Krogan forces that the Council had spent years trying to obtain. And the humans had compiled it within days. The Krogan are predictable. Reeve continued, casually dismantling an enemy the Council had fought for decades. They rely on brute force, overwhelming numbers, and fear tactics. Their strategies are primitive, and their command structure is inefficient. The holographic display zoomed in, revealing highlighted vulnerabilities in key Krogan strongholds. These, Reeve said, pointing at them, are their critical supply stations. We will destroy them within the first 48 hours of engagement. He turned his gaze back to the Council. You will not need a prolonged war. You will not need reinforcements. He let the words sink in before finishing. You will only need us. The room was deathly silent. No one had ever spoken to the Galactic Council like this. Not the Krogan, not the Drakkar Dominion, not even the fallen emperors of the lost ages. And yet here stood a human, telling them not how the war might be won, but how it would be won, on his terms. Grand Marshal Thelvrak exhaled slowly, his reptilian features tightening. "Admiral Reeve, you speak with absolute confidence. But words are not war. How can you be so certain?" Reeve finally leaned back, exhaling with measured patience, as if explaining something to a child. "Because, Grand Marshal, we are not like you." His voice was almost calmly unsettling. "You have spent centuries waging war to expand your borders, to prove your dominance." His expression turned icy. "We have spent centuries perfecting war so that we would never have to fight it." The weight of the words sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. Varzek's voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "And now?" Reeve's smile returned, but this time, it was not reassuring. "Now, we remind the galaxy why we were never meant to join your wars." When the storm breaks, the stars trembled as the Terran Imperial Armada advanced. In the vast silence of space, the assembled Galactic Council fleet floated like a fragile congregation, their ships locked in formation, weapons primed, waiting for the inevitable clash with the Krogan horde. And yet, despite the imminent battle, all eyes were on the Terran fleet. For decades, the Galactic Council had warred against the Krogan. They had studied their enemy, formulated countermeasures, suffered devastating losses, and endured a conflict with no end in sight. Their best minds had determined that victory, if it ever came, would be long, bloody, and costly. But then the humans arrived, and they had a different plan. On the bridge of his flagship, the TSS Ragnarok, Admiral Marcus Reeve stood before a vast holographic display, hands clasped behind his back, his expression impassive as the enemy fleet surged into view. The Krogan Armada was an ugly, chaotic thing, hulking biomechanical warships, grotesque in design, their massive chitinous hulls pulsing with an eerie blue glow. Their fleets did not move in elegant formations or careful tactics. Instead, they came like a tidal wave of destruction, swarming the battlefield in overwhelming numbers, prepared to grind their enemies to dust in sheer brute force. That strategy had worked against every other species in the galaxy. But against humans, it would be their undoing. Reeve exhaled, his voice calm, steady, and absolute. "Begin the operation." A single command, and the entire battlefield shifted. The silence before the storm. From the Council fleet, hundreds of officers and commanders watched in stunned silence as the Terran Armada sprang to life. Not with desperation, not with hesitation, but with terrifying precision. The Terran ships did not wait for the enemy to come to them. Instead, they moved first. It was unnatural, suicidal, even, to charge headfirst at the Krogan Armada. Every species in the galaxy had learned that the best chance of surviving a Krogan assault was to maintain defensive formations, to absorb the enemy's first brutal push before attempting a counteroffensive. But the humans ignored this wisdom. Instead, their sleek, black warships surged forward, faster than anything the Council had ever seen, cutting through the darkness like predatory shadows. The Krogan reacted exactly as expected, with laughter. Across the Krogan fleet, commanders bellowed deep, guttural roars of amusement, their booming voices filling the Council's intercepted transmissions. The humans had fallen for the trap, rushing to engage without hesitation, without holding their defensive lines. To the Krogan, this was a gift. To the humans, it was a trap they had set themselves. The first strike. As the first Krogan warships lunged forward, eager to tear apart their foolish prey, the human fleet vanished. One moment, they were there. The next, they were gone. The Council officers gasped. "What?" One of the Drakkar strategists cursed. They're disappearing from our sensors." And then, the Krogan's first line of warships exploded. The human war doctrine. Shock and ruin. The Terran Armada had not charged forward to fight. They had charged forward to set a trap. Using a level of electronic warfare unseen in the galaxy, the humans had jammed the enemy's targeting systems, then executed a maneuver so precise, so unnatural, that it seemed almost supernatural. At the last second, The human ships broke formation, executing rapid acceleration jumps, vanishing from direct sensor detection. Then, from seemingly nowhere, the Krogan fleet was torn apart. Hellfire from the void. The Terran vessels reappeared not in front of the Krogan fleet, but behind them, in perfect formation. Then they opened fire. It was not a desperate barrage. It was surgical destruction. The first wave of human firepower tore through the enemy's key command ships, obliterating their communication centers before the Krogan even realized what was happening. Missiles, perfectly timed to exploit weak spots, detonated in synchronized waves, leaving the Krogan formation in chaos. This was not the reckless assault of an untested species. This was a species that had studied war long before the stars had known their name. For the first time in history, the Krogan broke ranks, and the humans did not let them recover. The annihilation. Gods, one of the council officers whispered as he watched the battlefield unfold in complete horror. What is this? Another murmured, but they already knew the answer. This was not war as they understood it. This was slaughter. The human fleet moved with an eerie efficiency, their weapons carving apart Krogan warships like they were insects. For every one human vessel lost, 20 Krogan warships fell. For every Terran pilot that perished, an entire Krogan command structure collapsed. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The turning point. On the Krogan command ship, Supreme Warlord Gorka Ther watched in horror as his once invincible forces collapsed around him. His entire species had waged war for generations, had conquered entire civilizations through sheer brute strength. And yet, the humans, these so-called cowards of war, were tearing them apart with unfathomable precision. How? His bellowing voice filled the bridge. Where are their weaknesses? Where are their mistakes? No one answered, because the humans had not made a single mistake. And then, his ship's sensors locked onto something massive, a ship unlike anything the Krogan had ever seen. It dwarfed his command vessel. Its presence alone sent a tremor through his bones. The holographic display identified it. TSS Ragnarok. The name meant nothing to Gorka Ther, but somehow he knew what it meant. The end. Admiral Reeves' final words. The holographic display on Gorka Ther's ship flickered to life. Admiral Marcus Reeves stared at him from the screen. His expression was not cruel. It was not angry, not vengeful. It was simply inevitable. You should have left us alone, Reeves said calmly. Gorka Ther roared in defiance. And then the TSS Ragnarok fired. The Krogan warlord's ship was erased from existence, the galaxy's new reality. The Council fleet watched in stunned horror as the last Krogan warships fell. The war that had lasted decades had been ended in less than a day. And the humans, they had barely broken a sweat. As silence fell over the battlefield, one terrible truth settled over the Galactic Council. They had forced the humans into war. And now they could never undo what they had unleashed. The war that ended in silence. The Galactic Council had made a fatal miscalculation. For centuries, they had mistaken human restraint for human weakness. They had believed that the Terran Empire's diplomacy, their trade agreements, their refusal to engage in pointless conflicts was a sign of fear, of cowardice. They were wrong. And now, the battlefield was silent, except for the hushed whispers of disbelief from the surviving Council commanders. The Krogan horde was gone. Not retreating. Not surrendering. Gone. The humans had not merely won the war. They had erased the enemy from existence. The aftermath of annihilation. Across the battlefield, debris floated like the remnants of a shattered empire. The once mighty Krogan warships, those monstrous biomechanical horrors, were now nothing more than scattered wreckage. Ripped apart, their glowing husks cooling in the void of space. On the bridge of the TSS Ragnarok, Admiral Marcus Reeves stood motionless, arms crossed, his face unreadable as the final reports came in. "Casualties?" he asked. His second-in-command, Commander Elaine Voss, checked her tactical readouts. 17 ships lost, she answered. Minor structural damage to the fleet. Less than 200 personnel confirmed KIA. Silence. They had entered the war a few hours ago, and in that time, obliterated the deadliest threat in the galaxy. Reeve exhaled slowly, expression blank, his eyes drifting over the holographic tactical display. And the Krogan. Voss didn't need to check. She already knew the answer. Gone, sir. A slow murmur spread through the Terran fleet. It was not a victory cheer, not a celebration, but acknowledgement. For 1,000 years, the Krogan had terrorized the galaxy, crushed planets beneath their ruthless war machine, and pushed countless species to the brink of extinction. But now, in mere hours, the humans had wiped them from history. With surgical precision, with no mercy. And now, the galaxy was watching. The Council's fear. On the flagship of the Galactic Council, Commander Krennak sat frozen in his command chair, eyes locked on the battlefield. He had spent his life studying military strategy, understanding the limits of war, preparing for the day when the Council would finally gain an upper hand against the Krogan. But nothing, in his experience had prepared him for this. The humans had not fought a war. They had executed one. His second-in-command, Saul, stood trembling beside him, his reptilian skin pale with shock. "This isn't war," Saul whispered. This is something else." Krennak didn't respond, because he knew the truth. The humans had spent centuries avoiding war, refusing war, rejecting war. But not because they were afraid. They had spent centuries preparing. For this. For a war that would never last more than a day. And now, for the first time, the Galactic Council began to understand what they had done. They had awakened something far worse than the Krogan. The Terran message. A sharp chime echoed across the Council flagship, breaking the suffocating silence. A transmission. From the Terran Empire. "Put it through," Krennak ordered, forcing his voice to remain steady. The screen flickered, and Admiral Marcus Reeve appeared. The bridge fell silent. Reeve was calm. His expression was neutral, his stance composed, his uniform unblemished, as if this battle had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Commander Krennak," Reeve said smoothly, his tone absent of arrogance, absent of emotion. Krennak swallowed hard. "Admiral, the war is over." A pause. Then a slow nod. "Yes," Reeve replied. "It is." The Council officers stared at the screen in disbelief, in fear, in quiet horror. The war had lasted decades, and the humans had ended it in an afternoon. Krennak licked his lips, trying to think of the right words, trying to find some way to maintain diplomacy, to hold on to some illusion of power. "The Council is grateful for your assistance," he said carefully. Reeve's expression didn't change. "We didn't do this for the Council," he said simply. Silence. Krennak's blood went cold. The implications were clear. This was not an alliance. This was not an act of unity. The Terran Empire had not joined the war to save the Galactic Council. They had joined it because they wanted to. Because they had decided it was time. And that realization terrified Krennak more than anything else. The final warning. Reeve exhaled softly, glancing over his shoulder at the vast wreckage of the Krogan fleet. "This," he said evenly, "is what happens when we decide to go to war. No threats, no boasting, no demands, just a statement of fact." Krennak's heart pounded. The message was clear. The humans were not conquerors. They were not invaders, not warmongers. But if they went to war, if they were forced into war, there would be nothing left of their enemies. The Council had demanded their help. They had forced humanity's hand. And now, the entire galaxy had witnessed what humanity was capable of. "Do not ask us to do this again," Reeve continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "Because next time, We may not stop. The transmission ended, and the council was left to process what they had done. The humans had not wanted war. They had tried to avoid it. And now, war had changed forever. No one would ever challenge the Terran Empire again. Not after this. Not after what they had unleashed.